Robert Bowers ran his thumb along the edge of the custom walnut serving board, checking for any rough spots the sander might have missed. The grain curved perfectly through the wood like flowing water. 9 years of marriage, and Rena still got excited about these family dinners. At least, she used to. He set the board on the kitchen counter and glanced at the digital clock on the oven. 4:30 p.m. Rena should be getting ready upstairs, but the house felt too quiet. Ren, he called up the stairs. You need help with anything? Her voice drifted down, tight and distracted. I'm fine. Robert frowned. That tone meant something, but after 9 years, he'd learned when to push and when to wait. He pulled ingredients from the refrigerator for his mother's pot roast recipe. Avery would bring dessert. Jace would bring his usual complaints about work. Just another monthly dinner with family. The stairs creaked as Rena came down. Robert looked up from seasoning the meat and stopped. She wore the black dress she'd bought 3 months ago, but never worn. Her makeup looked fresh, careful. Too careful for a family dinner at their own house. You look nice, he said. She tugged at the dress hem. Thanks. I'm going to head over to Avery's early to help her prep. She's bringing store-bought cake. What's to prep? Rena grabbed her purse from the counter, not meeting his eyes. She wanted to talk about something first. Girl stuff. Robert watched her check her reflection in the microwave door. She'd reapplied lipstick twice since coming downstairs. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted her earrings. Everything okay? Of course. She kissed his cheek quickly, leaving no trace of lipstick. I'll be back by 6 with Avery and Jace. The front door closed with a soft click. Robert stood in the kitchen, holding a piece of raw beef, and tried to shake the feeling that something had shifted. Rena's anxious energy felt different today. Not excited different. Guilty different. He'd learned to read people during his childhood, when knowing his father's mood meant the difference between a peaceful evening and a violent one. Quiet men see everything, his mother used to say. And right now, Robert saw his wife lying to his face. He seasoned the roast with more force than necessary and slid it into the oven. The timer showed 2 hours until dinner. He could finish the trim work in the guest bathroom, maybe start on the invoice spreadsheets for next week. Instead, he found himself staring out the kitchen window toward the direction of Avery's house. 6 blocks away, close enough to walk. Robert pulled off his apron and grabbed his keys. The serving board sat on the counter, perfect and ready. A good excuse to drop by early. The late afternoon sun cast everything in golden light as Robert pulled into Avery's driveway. Her car sat in its usual spot. Jace's BMW was parked on the street instead of the driveway, which struck Robert as odd. Jace always complained about tree sap and preferred the covered carport. Robert grabbed the serving board from the passenger seat and walked to the front door. He knocked twice, then pressed the doorbell. No answer. He could hear voices from somewhere inside the house, but no one came to the door. He tried calling Avery's cell phone. It rang several times before going to voicemail. Weird, he muttered, then walked around to the back of the house. Avery often worked in her garden this time of day. The back door was usually unlocked during family dinner prep. The door opened silently. Robert stepped into the kitchen and set the serving board on the counter. Avery? It's me. No response, but he could hear voices more clearly now, coming from the living room. He recognized Rena's laugh, but it sounded different. Breathless, Robert moved quietly through the kitchen. 20 years of construction work had taught him how to walk without making noise. The hallway opened to the living room, and he stopped just before the doorway. God, I've missed this. Rena's voice, low and thick with something Robert had never heard directed at him. Your husband's going to wonder where you are, Jace replied. Robert's too busy with his precious woodworking to notice anything. Robert peered around the corner. Rena knelt on the carpet in front of the couch where Jace sat. Her hands worked at his belt while Jace ran his fingers through her hair. The black dress she'd been so careful about was wrinkled, pushed up around her thighs. The serving board would have made a sound if he'd dropped it. Instead, Robert gripped it tighter and forced himself to stay silent. To watch. To be sure. Jace leaned back against the couch cushions. Tell me what you want. I want you to make me forget he exists. The words hit Robert like a physical blow, but he remained motionless. His sister's husband. His wife. In his sister's house, a phone started ringing. Robert's heart jumped, but it wasn't his phone. The sound came from somewhere in the living room. Shit, Jace muttered, pushing Rena away. That's Averly. Where's she? Rena asked, straightening her dress. She went to pick up Emma from soccer practice. Robert pulled out his own phone and video called Averly. The ringing grew louder. He expected to hear it from Jace's pocket. Instead, it came from behind him. Robert turned slowly. Averly sat in the hallway, her back against the wall, watching him. Her phone buzzed in her hand, showing Robert's face on the screen. She lifted one finger to her lips and mouthed, "Not now." She declined the call. Robert stared at his sister. How long had she been sitting there? How long had she known? Averly stood quietly and gestured toward the back door. Robert followed her outside, his mind reeling. They walked to the far end of the backyard, near Averly's vegetable garden, before either of them spoke. How long? Robert asked. 2 months that I know of. Averly's voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she pulled a cigarette from her pocket. Maybe longer. Why didn't you tell me? She lit the cigarette and took a long drag. Would you have believed me without proof? Robert considered this. Probably not. Rena could be dramatic, but adultery seemed beyond her. And Jace, for all his arrogance, was family. You were waiting for me to see it myself. I was waiting for enough evidence that you couldn't deny it, and they couldn't talk their way out of it. Averly blew smoke toward the sky. I've been collecting things. Photos, credit card statements, hotel receipts. Hotel receipts. Jace thinks I don't check her joint account. He's been paying for rooms at the Hampton Inn on Bardstown Road every Tuesday for the past 6 weeks. Robert felt something cold settle in his chest. Tuesdays, the days Rena said she was working late at the boutique. Avery. He looked at his sister, really looked at her. Dark circles under her eyes. Weight loss. The cigarette habit she'd quit 5 years ago. Are you okay? She laughed, but it sounded broken. My husband is sleeping with my brother's wife in my house while I'm picking up my daughter from soccer practice. How okay could I be? They stood in silence for a moment. Robert could hear Rena's voice through the window, talking about dinner plans. Acting normal. So what now? He asked. Averly dropped the cigarette and crushed it under her heel. That depends. Do you want revenge or closure? Robert thought about the life he'd built. The business he and Kellen had grown from nothing. The house he'd renovated room by room. The marriage he'd believed in completely until 30 minutes ago. What's the difference? Closure means we confront them, get divorces, and move on with our lives. Revenge means we make them pay for what they've done. Robert looked back toward the house where his wife was probably fixing her makeup, preparing to come home and act like the loving wife she'd pretended to be for God knows how long. I want them to pay, he said quietly. Averly nodded. Then let me handle the cost. You just do what you do best, which is stay quiet, watch everything, and build something they can't tear down. Robert drove home in silence, the serving board beside him like evidence of a life that had existed 2 hours ago. Rena's car wasn't in the driveway yet. Good. He needed time to think. Inside, the pot roast filled the house with the smell of normalcy. Robert turned off the oven and sat at the kitchen table. He tried to reconcile the woman he'd married with the woman he'd seen in Averly's living room. His phone buzzed. A text from Rena, running late. Start dinner without us. Another lie. Robert deleted the message and poured himself a beer. He'd never been a heavy drinker, but tonight felt like an exception. T730, headlights swept across the front windows. Robert heard car doors slamming, voices on the front walk. Rena's laugh, bright and fake. Jace's voice complaining about traffic. The front door opened. Sorry, we're late. Rena called out. Averly couldn't find her good serving spoons. Robert stood as they entered the kitchen. Rena had changed clothes. Now she wore jeans and a casual sweater, her earlier dress nowhere to be seen. Her makeup was perfect again. Hey, brother. Jace clapped Robert on the shoulder. Something smells good. Mom's pot roast recipe, Robert replied, studying Jace's face. No guilt, no nervousness, just the usual arrogant smile. Averly entered carrying a store-bought cake. She met Robert's eyes briefly, then looked away. Emma's at a sleepover, she announced. So we can actually have adult conversation tonight. They sat around the dining room table like they had every month for 3 years. Robert carved the roast and served it while Rena told a story about a difficult customer at the boutique. Jace complained about his boss. Avery mostly stayed quiet. Robert watched them all, seeing the performance for what it was. Rena touched his arm when she talked, the same way she always did. But now he could see the calculation behind it. The practiced affection. "You're quiet tonight," Jace observed. "Long day," Robert replied. "Finished the Morrison bathroom renovation." Mrs. Morrison wanted to change the tile at the last minute. "Customers always do that," Rena said. "Change their minds right at the end." The irony wasn't lost on Robert. He cut his meat carefully and chewed slowly, buying time. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Jace dominated the conversation, talking about a promotion opportunity at his finance company. Rena curled up next to Robert on the couch, her head on his shoulder. "I'm lucky to have such a hard-working husband," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Robert's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. At 10 o'clock, Jace announced they should head home. "Early day, tomorrow." Robert walked them to the door. Jace shook his hand. Rena kissed his cheek. Avery hugged him goodbye, whispering, "Tomorrow. My house. Noon." After they left, Robert and Rena cleaned up together. She chattered about Avery's new haircut and Jace's promotion prospects. Normal married conversation. "I'm going to shower," she announced when the kitchen was clean. Robert nodded and went to his workshop in the garage. He pulled out a piece of oak and began sanding it aggressively, working off the energy that had been building all evening. His phone buzzed. A text from Avery. "You okay?" He typed back, "Are you? I've been living with this for months. You've had it for a few hours. There's a difference." Robert set down the sandpaper and really considered what his sister had said. She'd been sitting in that hallway, watching her husband betray her in her own home. How many times had she done that? How long had she been collecting evidence while pretending everything was normal? Another text. "We need a plan. A real one." Robert looked up at the ceiling, where he could hear water running in the master bathroom. Rena was washing off the evidence of her afternoon. He typed, "I'm listening." Not over text. "Tomorrow. I'll show you everything I have." Robert spent the rest of the evening in the garage, sanding wood and thinking. When he finally went inside, Rena was already asleep, or pretending to be. He stood in the bathroom doorway, watching her breathe. 9 years of marriage. 3 years trying for children that never came. Countless nights talking about their future together. All of it built on lies. Robert brushed his teeth and got into bed. Rena shifted closer to him in her sleep, the way she'd done for years. He lay still and stared at the ceiling until dawn. Robert arrived at Avery's house at exactly noon. She answered the door immediately, as if she'd been watching for him. "Emma's at school," she said. "We have 3 hours before Jace gets home." She led him to the kitchen table, where manila folders sat in neat stacks. Credit card statements, bank records, printed emails, photos taken through windows. "I've been building a case," Avery said simply. Robert opened the first folder. Hotel receipts dating back 12 weeks. Always Tuesday afternoons. Always the same room. Always charged to Jace's personal credit card. "He's not even trying to hide it," Robert muttered. "Men like Jace don't think they'll get caught. They think they're smarter than everyone else." Robert flipped through phone records showing dozens of calls between Rena and Jace's numbers. Text message logs with suspicious timing. "How did you get all this?" "Jace uses our shared computer for everything. He never logs out of anything. And I've always handled our finances." Avery sat across from him. "The question is, what do we do with it?" Robert studied a photo of Rena entering the Hampton Inn, taken from across the parking lot. She looked excited, happy in a way he hadn't seen in months. "We make them destroy themselves," he said finally. Over the next hour, they developed a plan. Robert would pull back emotionally from Rena, but maintain normal appearances. Avery would continue gathering evidence while acting oblivious. Most importantly, they would let Rena and Jace's guilt and paranoia work against them. "The affair will collapse on its own if we apply the right pressure," Avery explained. "They're not in love. They're just using each other to feel better about their lives." Robert drove home with copies of everything hidden in his truck's toolbox. When he entered the house, Rena was on the phone, laughing at something the person on the other end had said. I have to go, she said quickly when she saw him. Yeah, I'll talk to you later. She hung up and smiled at him. How was lunch with Kellen? Another lie. Robert had told her he was having lunch with his business partner. Good. We talked about the Peterson project. That's nice. Rena kissed his cheek. I was thinking we could order pizza tonight. I don't feel like cooking. Sure. That evening, Robert sat in his chair reading while Rena watched television. But instead of his usual biography, he was reading through bank statements. Their joint checking account showed regular withdrawals that Rena had claimed were for household expenses. Gas station charges on the other side of town. Restaurants they'd never been to together. What are you reading? Rena asked during commercial. Work stuff, Robert replied without looking up. She went to bed early, claiming a headache. Robert stayed up until midnight, changing passwords on their shared accounts and setting up alerts for any new activity. If Rena was going to spend their money on her affair, she'd have to ask him for access first. Over the next week, Robert watched his wife scramble to explain why her usual credit card wasn't working. He played dumb, suggesting she call the bank about a possible technical issue. The inconvenience made her irritable, but she couldn't complain without revealing why she needed private access to money. Meanwhile, he opened new accounts at a different bank, slowly transferring funds from their joint savings. Not enough to raise immediate suspicion, but enough to protect himself when the marriage inevitably ended. Rena grew more anxious as her routine became disrupted. She started taking longer showers, making more mysterious phone calls, finding new excuses to leave the house. I'm going shopping with Kelly, she announced one Saturday morning, naming a friend she rarely saw. Have fun, Robert replied from behind his newspaper. But instead of shopping, Rena drove to the Hampton Inn. Robert knew because he'd started tracking her phone's location through their shared family plan. Technology she'd helped him set up years ago for safety reasons. When she returned 3 hours later with no shopping bags, Robert was waiting in the kitchen. Forget to buy anything. Rena froze. What? You went shopping, but came back empty-handed. Oh. She forced a laugh. Kelly dragged me around for hours, but I didn't find anything I liked. Robert nodded and went back to his newspaper. But Rena stood in the kitchen for several more minutes, clearly rattled by the simple question. Talia Quinn's law office occupied the second floor of a renovated Victorian house in the Highlands. Robert had never needed a lawyer before, but Averly insisted Talia was the best family attorney in Louisville. I hear you need some advice, Talia said, gesturing for Robert to sit across from her desk. Robert had expected someone older, more formal. Talia looked like she could be Averly's age, with sharp eyes and a direct manner that put him at ease. I'm not sure what I need yet, he admitted. Averly filled me in on the basic situation. Your wife is having an affair with your brother-in-law. Talia opened a legal pad. How do you want to handle it? I want to protect myself financially, and I want them to face consequences for what they've done. Revenge or justice? Robert considered the question. What's the difference? Revenge is emotional. It feels good in the moment, but can backfire legally. Justice is strategic. It protects your interests while letting their choices catch up with them. Talia explained Kentucky's divorce laws, the importance of documenting financial misconduct, and the value of patience in building a strong case. The courts favor the spouse who appears reasonable and prepared, she said. If you file first with clear evidence of adultery and financial impropriety, you'll have significant advantages in asset division. Robert showed her copies of the evidence Averly had collected. Talia reviewed everything methodically, making notes. This is excellent documentation, she said finally. Your sister missed her calling as a private investigator. What else do we need? More recent evidence. Proof that the affair is ongoing, not just something that happened in the past. And we need to document any marital assets your wife has misused to fund the relationship. Over the next week, Robert followed Talia's advice meticulously. He photographed every withdrawal Rena made from their remaining joint account. He saved voicemails where she lied about her whereabouts. He documented her strange behavior and suspicious explanations. The evidence folder grew thicker daily. Meanwhile, Rena's anxiety increased. Without easy access to money, she had to ask Robert directly for cash, creating awkward conversations about expenses she couldn't fully explain. I need $200, she said one evening. For what? Kelly's birthday present. And some things for the house. Robert gave her the money and made a note of it. Later, he checked their shared credit card account and saw charges at the Hampton Inn and an expensive restaurant across town. Rena had spent their money on a date with Jace. The pattern repeated weekly. Rena would ask for cash, claiming household needs, then spend it maintaining her affair. Each transaction became another piece of evidence. Robert also began documenting their normal routines. The days Rena worked late at the boutique. Her sudden interest in going to the gym. The new clothes she bought but never wore around him. You're building an airtight case, Talia told him during their second meeting. But are you prepared for how this will end? What do you mean? Once you file for divorce, there's no going back. Your marriage will be over permanently. Some people think they want revenge until they realize the full cost. Robert thought about the woman he'd married 9 years ago. The woman who'd supported him when he started his business. Who'd held him when they got the news about her fertility issues. Who'd painted their kitchen yellow because it made mornings feel more cheerful. That woman felt like a stranger now. I'm prepared, he said. Kellen Ward had never liked Jace Carter. That man's got the kind of arrogance that comes from never being punched in the mouth, he'd told Robert years ago. Now, sitting in Robert's garage workshop, Kellen listened to the whole story without interruption. When Robert finished, Kellen cracked his knuckles. So we're burning it all down. We're letting them burn it down themselves. We're just providing the matches. Kellen grinned. 3 tours in Afghanistan had given him a practical view of conflict resolution. What do you need me to do? Robert explained his idea. Kellen would invite Jace to the monthly poker game he hosted for some guys from work. Get him drinking, get him talking, get him overconfident. Men like Jace can't resist bragging about their conquests, Robert said. Especially if he thinks he's around friends. And you want me to record it. Everything. But make it seem natural. Like you're impressed by his stories. The poker game was scheduled for Friday night. Robert spent the week planting seeds with Rena, mentioning casually that Kellen had invited Jace to join their regular game. That's nice, Rena said, but Robert caught the worry in her voice. Jace doesn't usually hang out with your friends. Kellen thought he might enjoy it. Change of pace from his usual crowd. Friday evening, Robert kissed Rena goodbye and drove to Kellen's house. But instead of joining the poker game, he parked 3 blocks away and waited. His phone buzzed with updates from Kellen. 8:30 p.m. He's here. Already talking big. 9:15 p.m. 2 beers in. Starting to brag about work. 10:00 p.m. Getting personal. You sure you want this? 10:30 p.m. Holy shit. Recording everything. At midnight, Kellen sent a final text. Got it all. You need to hear this. Robert drove to Kellen's house after the other players had left. Kellen handed him a small digital recorder. Fair warning, Kellen said. This is going to hurt. Robert pressed play. Jace's voice filled the room, slurred with alcohol and arrogance. You guys don't understand what it's like being married to a frigid woman. Avali acts like sex is a chore. But Robert's wife. Laughter. That woman is hungry for attention. She practically threw herself at me. Really? Another voice, probably Tom from Kellen's construction crew. Oh yeah, she started flirting at family dinners months ago. Little touches, meaningful looks. I knew she wanted it. Robert's hands tightened on the recorder. Jace continued. The best part is Robert has no idea. Guy's so focused on his precious woodworking business, he can't see what's happening in his own house. I'm stealing from him twice a week, and he just sits there like a dumb ox. Stealing what? Kellen's voice, carefully casual. His wife. His pride. Hell, even his money. Rena uses their joint account to pay for our hotel rooms. Robert's literally paying for me to screw his wife. Harsh laughter from around the table. That's cold, someone said. That's smart, Jace replied. Robert thinks he's this honest, hardworking guy, but he's just naive. In the real world, nice guys finish last. Robert turned off the recorder. The room felt very quiet. There's more, Kellen said gently. About an hour of him detailing their activities and talking about how stupid you are for not seeing it. Robert pocketed the recorder. This is perfect. You sure you're okay? I'm better than okay. Jace just confessed to adultery, theft, and conspiracy to defraud. in front of 6 witnesses. While Robert collected evidence from Jace, he also began working on Rena's paranoia. He started leaving his phone face down when she was around, taking calls in other rooms, claiming to work late on projects that didn't exist. Rena noticed immediately. "Who was that?" she asked after he finished a fake phone call with a fake client. "Work stuff. You wouldn't be interested. Try me." Robert looked at her with mild surprise. "Since when do you care about construction details?" The question planted doubt in Rena's mind. If Robert was being secretive, maybe he was hiding something too. Maybe he suspected her affair. Maybe he was planning his own revenge. Her anxiety increased daily. She started checking his phone when he was in the shower, looking for evidence of his own secrets. She found nothing, which only made her more nervous. Meanwhile, Robert sent Rena carefully crafted text messages designed to make her question Jace's commitment. "Saw Jace having lunch with a brunette at Cafe Metro today. Looked cozy. Did you know Jace got a promotion? Weird that he didn't mention it to Averly. Jace seemed distracted at dinner. Everything okay with him?" Each message was designed to sound innocent while feeding Rena's insecurities. Was Jace seeing someone else? Was he using her? Was their affair just temporary entertainment for him? The seeds of doubt grew quickly. Rena began questioning Jace during their meetings, asking about his commitment to her and their future together. The conversations became arguments. Arguments became accusations. Their coordination started falling apart. Jace would tell Averly he was working late, while Rena told Robert she was shopping. But their stories didn't match when cross-referenced. Small inconsistencies that raised suspicions. Robert watched it all unfold from a distance. Documenting every crack in their foundation. One evening, Rena came home agitated after a meeting with Jace. "Everything okay?" Robert asked innocently. "Fine," she snapped, then immediately softened her tone. "Sorry, just tired." But she wasn't fine. The affair that had been her escape from reality was becoming another source of stress. Jace was becoming demanding, possessive. He wanted more of her time, more commitment, more risk. Rena had wanted excitement, not complications. "You know what?" Robert said that night as they got ready for bed. "We should take a vacation. Just the two of us. Get away from everything." Rena stared at him in the bathroom mirror. "A vacation? Why not? We haven't done anything romantic in months. I've been too focused on work." The suggestion terrified Rena. A vacation meant leaving Jace behind. It meant confronting her marriage instead of escaping from it. "Maybe later," she said weakly. "Things are busy at the boutique." Robert nodded understandingly, but made a note of her reluctance. Another piece of evidence that his wife preferred her affair to their marriage. 3 weeks before the next monthly family dinner, Robert met with Averly and Talia to finalize their plan. "Everything has to happen simultaneously," Talia explained. "We expose the affair, Robert files for divorce, and Averly files her own paperwork. If we give them time to coordinate their defense, they'll find ways to minimize the damage." Averly had prepared a presentation, a slideshow that would play on Robert's television during dinner. It started with innocent family photos from the past year, then gradually revealed the evidence of betrayal. "The psychological impact will be devastating," Averly said with clinical detachment. "They'll go from feeling safe and family-oriented to completely exposed in the span of minutes." Robert reviewed the slides one final time. Hotel receipts with dates and times. Photos of Rena and Jace entering rooms together. Bank statements showing misused joint funds. Text message logs revealing intimate conversations. And finally, Kellen's audio recording of Jace bragging about the affair. "This will destroy them both," Robert said. "Good," Averly replied. The night of the dinner, Robert prepared his mother's pot roast recipe one last time. He set the table carefully, making sure everyone's usual seats were positioned to see the television screen clearly. Rena came downstairs wearing a blue dress. New, expensive, charged to their joint credit card the previous week. She'd been making an effort lately, sensing Robert's emotional distance, but misinterpreting the cause. "Smells wonderful," she said, kissing his cheek. "I'm looking forward to a nice family evening." Robert almost felt sorry for her. Almost at 6 o'clock, Averly and Jace arrived together. Jace brought wine, an expensive bottle he'd charged to his and Averly's joint account. They all sat down like they had every month for 3 years. "Before we eat," Robert announced, "I put together a little slideshow. Some family memories from this past year." He dimmed the lights and started the presentation. The first slide showed genuine family moments. Christmas morning, Emma's birthday party, the 4 adults laughing together at various gatherings. "This is sweet," Renna said, reaching for Robert's hand. The slides continued. More family photos, but now they were interspersed with other images. A credit card statement showing charges at the Hampton Inn. A photo of Renna's car in the hotel parking lot. Renna's hand tightened on Robert's. "What is this?" The next slide showed text messages between her phone and Jace's phone. "Renna, can't wait to see you tomorrow." Jace, same room as always. "I'll be there first." Renna, "Robert thinks I'm working late again." Jace, "Your husband is an idiot." Jace had gone completely pale. "Robert, I can explain." "Explain what?" Robert's voice was calm, conversational. "We haven't gotten the good part yet." More slides. Bank records showing money withdrawn from Robert and Renna's joint account, then spent at expensive restaurants and hotels. Photos of Jace and Renna entering hotel rooms together, taken from different angles over several weeks. Renna was crying now. "Please stop. We're almost done," Robert said gently. The final slide was simple text, audio recording Kellen's poker game last Friday. Jace's voice filled the room, drunk and boastful. "I'm stealing from him twice a week, and he just sits there like a dumb ox. Robert's literally paying for me to screw his wife." The recording continued for 2 full minutes. Jace describing intimate details of his relationship with Renna. Jace mocking Robert's trust and work ethic. Jace laughing about how easy it had been to seduce a neglected wife. When it ended, the dining room was completely silent. Robert turned on the lights and looked around the table. Renna had buried her face in her hands. Jace sat frozen, his expensive wine untouched. Averly watched them both with cold satisfaction. "So," Robert said conversationally, "who wants to explain first?" Renna looked up, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Robert, please, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think. You've been having an affair with my sister's husband for months. You've been using our money to pay for hotels. You've been lying to my face every day." "I was going to end it," she whispered. "When?" "After you'd spent all our savings on hotel rooms." Jace finally found his voice. "Look, man, it just happened. We didn't mean for it to go this far." Robert turned to face his brother-in-law. "You didn't mean to brag about it to a room full of people? You didn't mean to call me an idiot for paying for your affair? That was just. I was drunk. I didn't mean." "You meant every word." Robert's voice remained level, but there was steel underneath. "You've been planning this for months. Both of you." Averly spoke for the first time since the slideshow began. "I want you out of the house tonight, Jace. Take whatever you can carry. I'll pack the rest and have it sent wherever you end up." "Averly, come on," Jace pleaded. "We can work this out. Marriage counseling, therapy, whatever you want. What I want is for you to leave my house and never come back." Renna turned to Robert, desperation in her voice. "We can fix this. Marriage counseling, like Jace said. I'll quit my job. We can move somewhere new, start over." "No." Robert's voice was final. "You'll be out by Monday. Talia Quinn will contact you about divorce proceedings." The name recognition hit both of them. Talia Quinn was known as the most aggressive divorce attorney in Louisville. "You already filed." Renna's voice was barely a whisper. "I'll be filing Monday morning, along with a civil suit for misappropriation of marital assets." Robert stood up from the table. "Dinner's over. You both know where the door is." Monday morning, Robert sat in Talia Quinn's office as she filed the divorce petition with Jefferson County Family Court. The paperwork was comprehensive adultery, abandonment, and financial misconduct, all documented with overwhelming evidence. "I'm also filing an emergency motion to freeze all joint assets," Talia explained. "Renna won't be able to access any shared accounts until the court determines fair distribution." Robert's phone had been buzzing all weekend with calls and texts from Renna. He'd blocked her number Sunday night after the 57th message. "What about the house?" It's in your name only, purchased before the marriage. She has no claim to it. Same with your business, you established it before you were married, and she never had any formal role in the company. Robert felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. The life he'd built through his own work would remain intact. Meanwhile, Averly had moved quickly with her own divorce proceedings. By Tuesday, she'd filed restraining orders preventing Jace from entering the house or contacting their daughter Emma. Jace showed up at Emma's school yesterday. Averly told Robert over lunch. Try to pick her up early without my permission. The school called the police. Where's he staying? Some extended stay hotel near his office. He got fired Wednesday. Robert raised his eyebrows. Fired? Apparently, his company has strict policies about moral conduct. When HR learned about the affair, particularly the part where he was bragging about committing fraud, they terminated him immediately. The dominoes were falling faster than Robert had anticipated. Jace's arrogance had infected every aspect of his life, and now it was destroying him completely. On Thursday, Rena showed up at Robert's workshop. Kellen intercepted her at the front door. He doesn't want to see you, Kellen said bluntly. Please, I just need 5 minutes to explain. Explain what? We all heard the recording. We all saw the receipts. What else is there to say? Rena started crying again. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But we had problems too. Robert was never home. We couldn't have children. I felt so alone. So you decided to cheat with his sister's husband and steal his money to pay for it. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You got caught, Rena. Accept it and move on. Robert watched the confrontation from his office window. Part of him wanted to go outside to hear what excuse she'd crafted, but a larger part of him felt nothing but contempt for the woman he'd once loved. Friday morning brought the property settlement conference. Robert, Averly, and their attorneys sat on one side of a polished conference table. Rena and Jace sat on the other side with their hastily retained lawyers. Rena looked exhausted. She'd lost weight, and her usual careful appearance had been replaced by the look of someone who'd been crying for days. Jace looked worse. Unshaven, wearing a wrinkled shirt, dark circles under his eyes. Unemployment and divorce papers had stripped away his usual arrogance. My client is prepared to offer a fair settlement. Rena's attorney began. Talia smiled coldly. Define fair. 50-50 split of all marital assets. Standard alimony arrangement. Absolutely not. Talia opened her briefcase and pulled out thick folders. Your client committed adultery, misappropriated marital funds, and conspired to defraud my client. She's entitled to nothing beyond what Kentucky law mandates for basic support. The negotiation was brutal and one-sided. Every time Rena's lawyer tried to claim assets or support, Talia produced evidence showing how those assets had been misused to fund the affair. The joint savings account your client claims to deserve half of, she spent 60% of it on hotel rooms and restaurants with her lover. The credit card debt she wants shared equally, 80% of it was charges related to the affair. By the end of the day, Rena would receive the minimum allowable under Kentucky law, essentially enough money to rent a modest apartment and survive for 6 months while finding steady employment. Jace fared even worse. With no job and substantial debt from funding the affair, he owed Averly money rather than receiving anything from their divorce. This is vindictive, Jace's attorney protested. This is consequences, Talia replied. Your clients made choices. Now they're experiencing the results of those choices. 6 months later, Robert stood in his expanded workshop, running his hand along a custom dining table he'd just finished. The business had grown significantly since the divorce. Word of mouth from satisfied customers, combined with his renewed focus on work, had created more demand than he could handle alone. He'd hired 2 part-time employees and was considering expanding into a larger space. The house felt different too. Quieter, but more peaceful. Robert had repainted the kitchen no more cheerful yellow that reminded him of false optimism. Now it was a calming blue-gray that matched his actual mood. Kellen knocked on the workshop door frame. Closing time, boss. You coming to Murphy's for dinner? Maybe later. Want to finish sanding this table. You know you don't have to work 16-hour days anymore, right? The divorce is final, business is good. You can actually enjoy life again. Robert considered this. For months, work had been his escape from the emotional wreckage of his marriage. But lately, he'd been working late simply because he enjoyed it, not because he was hiding from anything. "You dating anyone yet?" Kellen asked. "No." Robert didn't elaborate. The question came up regularly from friends and family, but he felt no urgency to find someone new. "It's been 6 months, man. Rena's poison is out of your system. You could start meeting people again." Robert set down his sandpaper and looked at his friend. "I'm not rebuilding what I didn't break." The words came out with quiet finality. Kellen understood and dropped the subject. That evening, Robert drove to Averly's new house. She'd moved to a smaller place in the Highlands, closer to Emma's school and her new job. The settlement from her divorce had provided enough money to start fresh. Emma answered the door, now 13, and handling her parents' divorce with remarkable maturity. "Uncle Robert." Mom's in the kitchen. Averly was making dinner for the three of them, something that had become a weekly tradition. She looked healthier than she had in years. The constant stress of living with Jace's behavior had lifted, and she'd started smiling again. "How's the nonprofit coming along?" Robert asked as they sat down to eat. "Better than expected. We've helped 12 women leave abusive relationships in the past 3 months. The grant money is covering rent for a proper office." Averly had used her experience with collecting evidence and navigating divorce proceedings to start a nonprofit helping other women escape toxic marriages. The work gave her purpose and helped her channel her anger into something constructive. "Any word from Jace?" "He sends child support payments through the court system." "That's it." Averly's voice was neutral. "I heard he moved to Nashville. Got a job with some small investment firm." Robert nodded. He occasionally wondered what had happened to Rena and Jace, but only in an abstract way. They become characters from someone else's story. "What about Rena?" Emma asked. At 13, she understood more about adult relationships than most kids her age. "She moved back to Indiana to live with her parents," Robert said. "Found a job at a department store." The information had come through mutual friends. Rena had tried to rebuild her life in Louisville, but the story of her affair had spread through their social circle. Starting over in her hometown had been her only realistic option. After dinner, Robert helped Emma with her algebra homework while Averly graded papers she'd gone back to school and was now teaching part-time at a local community college. "Uncle Robert," Emma said as he was leaving, "are you happy?" The question surprised him. "What do you mean?" "You seem different than before. Calmer, I guess, but also kind of sad." Robert considered how to answer. He wasn't sad exactly, but he wasn't particularly happy either. He felt settled, like someone who'd survived a storm and was now rebuilding in clearer weather. "I'm content," he said finally. "Sometimes that's enough." Driving home, Robert thought about Emma's question. Was he happy? Happiness seemed like the wrong word for what he felt. He was satisfied with his work, proud of how he'd handled the crisis, glad to have family relationships rebuilt on honest foundations. But romantic love, marriage, partnership, those concepts felt foreign now. Like artifact from someone else's life. At home, Robert sat on his back porch with a beer and watched the sun set over the neighborhood. His phone buzzed with a text from a woman named Lisa, someone Kellen had introduced him to the previous week. She was asking if he wanted to grab coffee over the weekend. Robert read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. He wasn't ready to trust someone with access to his life again. Maybe he never would be, but that felt like a choice rather than a limitation. The house was quiet in the best possible way. No lies hiding in the silence. No performance required. Just the honest peace of a man who'd learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. Robert finished his beer and went inside to work on his next project, a bookshelf for the living room. Something beautiful and functional, built to last. Something that couldn't be broken by anyone else's choices.